In the unforgiving heart of the West, a single act of compassion can cost you everything you've ever known. This isn't a story of cowboys and simple saloon brawls. This is the story of Mina Vance, a woman whose quiet life was shattered when she found a man left for dead at the edge of her father's land. He wasn't just any man. He was Cale, the son of a powerful Blackfoot chief, and the men who put him there were closer to her than she could ever imagine. Her choice to save him would ignite a fire of betrayal, forcing her to flee her own blood and become a ghost. But destiny is a patient hunter, and years later, their paths would cross again, forcing a final deadly reckoning. The dust of Redemption Gulch was a language Mina Vance knew by heart. It spoke of drought in fine, choking clouds, and of prosperity in the heavy, dark soil kicked up by the freight wagons. On this particular afternoon, in the blistering summer of 1878, it spoke of violence, not the loud, boastful violence of a drunken card game spilling from the saloon, but something quieter, more sinister, carried on the wind from the sprawling plains that bordered her father's ranch. Mina was not like the other women in town. While they concerned themselves with quilting bees and the latest gossip from the mercantile, Mina found her solace in the vast, open country. Her mother, gone 5 years now, had been a healer, a woman who understood the language of herbs and roots. She had passed that knowledge to Mina, a legacy that made the townsfolk both seek her out in times of sickness and whisper about her when she walked by. They called her strange, this serious young woman with eyes the color of a stormy sky and hands that were more comfortable tending to a fever than embroidering a pillowcase. Her father, Jedediah Vance, was a man carved from the land itself, hard, unyielding, and respected. His ranch was one of the largest in the territory, his influence felt in every corner of Redemption Gulch. He loved Mina in his own gruff way, but he despaired of her solitary nature, her preference for the whispering cottonwoods over polite society. A woman's place is in the home, Mina. He'd often say, his voice heavy with disapproval, not wandering the prairie like a lost soul. It was on one of these wanderings, tracing the path of a shallow creek that snaked through the far edge of their property, that she found him. At first, she thought it was a deer, a dark shape crumpled at the base of a rock outcropping. But the groan that reached her ears was human. Caution warred with the healer's instinct her mother had instilled in her. This was Blackfoot territory, and tensions with the settlers were a constant simmering threat. A lone woman approaching an unknown man, especially an injured one, was a fool's errand. Still, she couldn't turn away. Drawing closer, she saw the scene of a brutal struggle. The earth was torn, the grass trampled and stained. The man was lying face down, his buckskin tunic shredded and dark with blood. An arrow fletched with crow feathers was broken off in his shoulder. His hair, long and black as a raven's wing, was matted with dirt. As she knelt beside him, she carefully rolled him over. His face, even slack with pain and unconsciousness, was striking. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, and a proud mouth. He was young, no older than her own 22 years. He was not a settler. He was the son of a chief, she realized with a jolt of fear, recognizing the intricate beadwork on his moccasins and the eagle feather tied into his hair. This was dangerous. Helping him could bring the wrath of his people, or worse, the fury of whoever had done this to him. His eyes flickered open, dark and unfocused, clouded with agony. A word escaped his lips, a whisper in a language she didn't understand. Then his eyes closed again. Mina's mind raced. Leaving him here meant certain death, whether from his wounds or the predators that stalked the plains at dusk. Taking him back to the ranch was impossible. Her father's judgment would be swift and merciless. Jedediah Vance saw the natives as little more than obstacles to progress, a sentiment echoed by most men in Redemption Gulch. There was only one other option. A mile back, nestled in a hidden ravine, was an old line shack, long abandoned by the ranch hands. It was little more than a crumbling sod roof over a one-room shelter, but it was secluded. It was a chance. Her decision was made in the space of a single heartbeat. The healer in her won out over the fear. Summoning a strength she didn't know she possessed, Mina managed to get the man to his feet, draping his arm over her shoulders. He was heavy, a dead weight against her, and every step was a grueling battle. The sun beat down, and sweat stung her eyes, but she pushed onward, her focus narrowed to the single desperate goal of reaching the shack before he bled out or before they were discovered. The silent, watchful plains suddenly felt alive with unseen eyes, and the whisper in the cottonwoods sounded like a warning. She had just stepped off the edge of her world, and she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that there was no going back. The line shack smelled of damp earth and forgotten seasons. It was a miserable place, but to Mina, it was a sanctuary. She settled the unconscious man on a dilapidated cot, the only piece of furniture left in the decaying structure. For the next few hours she worked with a feverish intensity, her mind a whirlwind of her mother's lessons. She tore strips from her own petticoat to create bandages. Using a small knife from her belt, she sterilized the blade in the flame of a hastily built fire and set to the most terrifying task, removing the splintered arrowhead from his shoulder. His body arched in a silent scream of pain, and a low moan escaped his lips, but he did not wake. Mina's hands, slick with his blood, remained steady. She cleaned the wound as best she could with water from her canteen, then packed it with a poultice of yarrow she found, growing nearby a plant her mother had called woundwort. For 3 days he drifted in and out of consciousness, lost in a fevered haze. Mina became a creature of shadows and secrets. She would slip away from the ranch at dawn, telling her father she was collecting herbs, and return long after dusk, exhausted and on edge. She brought back food, water, and more supplies pilfered from the ranch's stores, a blanket, a small pot, precious medicine. Each trip was a gamble, a tightrope walk over a canyon of discovery. On the 4th day, the fever broke. Mina was wiping his brow with a cool, damp cloth when his eyes opened. This time they were clear, focused, and fixed on her with an unnerving intensity. He said nothing, simply watching her as she worked. The silence was heavy thick with unspoken questions and a palpable tension. "You should rest," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "You lost a lot of blood." He pushed himself up on one elbow, hissing as pain shot through his shoulder. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice raspy but strong. His English was perfect, carrying only the faintest melodic accent. "My name is Mina Vance." He studied her face, his gaze searching. "You are the one who pulled me from the creek. You were dying. The men who did this, did you see them?" he asked, his eyes hardening. She shook her head. "No, I only found you. They were long gone." He sank back onto the cot, his expression grim. "My name is Kyle. My father is Chief Running Wolf of the Blackfoot." The name sent another shiver of fear through her. Running Wolf was a powerful, respected leader, known for being a fierce protector of his people's lands. His son being attacked so close to settler territory was a spark that could ignite a war. Over the next week, as Kyle's strength slowly returned, the walls of the tiny shack expanded to contain their 2 worlds. He spoke of his life, of the traditions of his people, and of the growing shadow of the white man encroaching on their ancestral homes. He was not just a warrior. He was a leader in training, educated at the Carlisle Indian School back east. He understood both cultures, a position that left him feeling stranded between them. He told her of the attack. He had been returning from a solo hunt when he was ambushed by 4 white men. They weren't soldiers or random cowboys. They were professionals, their faces masked, their movements calculated. They were not trying to kill me, not at first. Kyle explained, his hand resting on the hilt of the knife she had returned to him. They wanted to take me. They spoke of a man named Silas, who would pay a great price for the son of Running Wolf. Mina listened, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. Men like that, bounty hunters or mercenaries, were often employed by powerful cattle barons or railroad men looking to clear natives from coveted land. Her own father was in talks with a consortium from Chicago, led by a man named Silas Croft, to expand his ranch eastward into Blackfoot territory. She pushed the thought away. It had to be a coincidence. Her father was a hard man, but he was no monster. As they talked, an unspoken connection grew between them. Mina saw not the savage the townsfolk feared, but a man of intelligence, honor, and a quiet sadness. Kyle, in turn, saw not just a white woman, but the person who had saved his life, a woman with a strength and compassion he had never encountered. He watched the way her hands moved with such purpose as she changed his dressings, the way she looked out at the plains, not as land to be conquered, but as something to be understood. One evening, as a storm raged outside, trapping them in the intimate confines of the shack, the air crackled with more than just lightning. "Why did you help me, Mina Vance?" Kyle asked softly, his eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "You risked everything. Your own people would see this as a betrayal." "I saw a man who was hurt," she answered simply, her gaze meeting his. "The rest didn't matter." He reached out his fingers, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The touch was electric, a jolt that went straight to her core. Her breath hitched. The storm outside faded into a distant roar, and all that existed was the space between them, a fragile, dangerous bridge being built, one shared secret at a time. The secret was no longer just about his survival. It was about the impossible feelings blooming between them in the heart of that hidden shack. The day Kyle was strong enough to leave came all too soon. A quiet melancholy had settled over the line shack, a mutual understanding that their time in this stolen pocket of the world was ending. He could now stand and walk with only a slight limp, and the wound in his shoulder was healing cleanly, a testament to Mina's diligent care. "I must return to my people," he announced one morning, his voice laced with regret. "They will think I am dead. My father's grief will be a heavy stone." Mina nodded, her heart sinking. "I know." They planned his departure for the dead of night. The risk of discovery was too great in the daylight. That afternoon, a sense of finality hung in the air. As she prepared a small bundle of food for his journey, Kyle came to stand behind her. "I have nothing to give you for what you have done," he said, his voice low and close to her ear. "My debt to you is one I can never repay." She turned to face him, the small space between them humming with unspoken emotion. "There is no debt, Kyle." His dark eyes searched hers. "The world will not see it that way. To my people you are a ghost who gave me back my life. To yours, you are a traitor." He gently took her hand, his thumb tracing the calluses on her palm. "I will not forget you, Mina Vance. When the winter snows fall, I will remember the warmth of this fire. When the summer sun is high, I will remember the courage in your eyes." Leaning in, he pressed his lips to hers. It was not a kiss of passion, but something deeper, more profound. It was a seal on a promise, a moment of connection, so pure and intense it stole the air from her lungs. It was a farewell that felt like a beginning. When he pulled away, he placed a small object in her palm. It was a single eagle feather, its base wrapped in intricately beaded quill work. "A symbol of honor among my people," he whispered. "Keep it safe. It will tell them you are a friend." That night, under a sliver of moon, she led him to the edge of her father's property, to the path that would take him back into the heart of the plains. They said nothing more, for everything had already been said in the quiet moments they had shared. With a final lingering look, Kyle melted into the darkness, leaving Mina alone with the vast, echoing silence of the prairie, and the feather clutched in her hand. She returned to the ranch house, her heart a tangle of sorrow and a strange new joy. She hid the eagle feather in a small wooden box where she kept her mother's few possessions. Her secret was safe. Kyle was safe. The next evening, her world came crashing down. Her father had invited his business associate, Mr. Silas Croft, for dinner. Croft was a man who oozed a dangerous charm, with cold, calculating eyes and a smile that never reached them. As Mina served the meal, she kept her head down, avoiding his gaze. "The deal is almost done, Jedediah," Croft said, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "The last obstacle is that stubborn old chief Running Wolf. He refuses to cede the eastern grazing lands." "He'll come around," Jedediah Vance said, with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Men like him always do once the right pressure is applied." Croft let out a low chuckle. "Our little plan to apply that pressure seems to have failed. My men lost the boy. Said he vanished into thin air. A shame. Having his son would have been the perfect leverage to make the old man sign." Mina froze a porcelain plate, slipping from her nerveless fingers and shattering on the wooden floor. Both men turned to look at her. Croft's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but it was her father's gaze that terrified her. It was sharp, analytical, and full of a dawning horror. "The boy?" Jedediah asked, his voice dangerously low, his eyes never leaving Mina's pale face. "You mean Cale?" "Of course," Croft snapped. "Who else?" Jedediah Vance rose slowly from his chair, his face a mask of thunder. He looked from his daughter's terrified expression to the direction of the old abandoned line shack. The pieces clicked into place with an audible sickening snap. The extra food gone missing, her long absences, the stolen medical supplies. "What have you done?" he hissed, his voice trembling with a rage that was colder and more terrifying than any shouting. Later that night, after Croft had left, he confronted her in the kitchen. He didn't yell. He spoke in a low, measured tone that cut her more deeply than any physical blow. "You helped him," he stated, his voice flat. "The son of the man standing between me and our future. You betrayed your own blood for a savage." "He was dying, Father," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "They ambushed him, your men. They were securing our legacy. He roared, his control finally breaking. That land will make us wealthy beyond measure. It will give you a life of comfort, a life of importance, and you threw it all away for a pathetic, sentimental impulse." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in like talons. "Silas Croft is not a forgiving man. When he finds out what you've done, he won't just come for you. He will ruin me. He will burn everything we have built to the ground." The man standing before her was a stranger. The father she knew, stern and demanding, but still her protector, was gone. In his place was a man who saw her not as a daughter, but as a liability. "You will tell me where he went," Jedediah demanded. Mina stared back, her fear solidifying into a core of defiance. She thought of Cale's promise, of the trust in his eyes. She would not betray him. No. The slap was so hard it sent her sprawling to the floor. Her father stood over her, his chest heaving, his face contorted with a mixture of fury and despair. "You have made your choice," he said, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "You are no longer my daughter. Get out of my house. Be gone by morning. If Croft's men find you here, I won't be able to protect you, and I won't try." He turned and walked away, leaving her weeping on the cold, hard floor, the shards of the broken plate digging into her knees like the pieces of her shattered life. Panic was a physical thing, a cold claw gripping Mina's heart. Her father's words echoed in the silent house. Be gone by morning. He wasn't just disowning her, he was sentencing her to death. Silas Croft was not a man who would let such an offense go unpunished. She was a loose end, a witness to his violent methods. She didn't wait for morning. In the dead of night, with only the moon, as her witness, Mina packed a small bag, a change of clothes, the last of her money, and the small wooden box containing her mother's remedies and the precious eagle feather from Kale. She looked around the room she had lived in her entire life, a place that was no longer a home, but a trap. With a final heartbreaking glance at the life she was leaving behind, she slipped out into the darkness. She didn't dare take a horse from the stable. Its absence would be noted too quickly. She set off on foot, heading west, away from Redemption Gulch, away from her father, and away from the direction Kyle had gone. Their paths had crossed once, but for her to live, they must never cross again. The first few weeks were a living nightmare. She traveled by night and hid during the day, her ears tuned to the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Every stranger was a potential threat, every distant rider one of Croft's men. She ate what she could forage and spent her meager savings on stagecoach tickets that took her further and further away, hopping from one dusty town to the next, never staying anywhere for more than a day or two. She shed the name Mina Vance, like a snake sheds its skin. In one town, she was Sarah, in another Mary. She cut her long hair short, trading her worn dress for practical men's trousers, and a shirt hiding her feminine form under a dusty coat. She was becoming a ghost, a nameless, faceless woman, drifting through the harsh landscape of the frontier. The journey changed her. The soft-hearted girl who had tended to a wounded man was buried under layers of hardship and vigilance. A new woman emerged, one who was leaner, tougher, with eyes that were perpetually watchful. The trust she once gave freely was now a locked vault. After months of running, she finally ended up in Stone Creek, a bustling mining town, nestled in the mountains, hundreds of miles from the plains she once called home. It was a place where people came to disappear to reinvent themselves. It felt safe. Here she became Lena, a quiet woman who kept to herself. Her knowledge of herbs and healing, once a source of suspicion, became her salvation. She set up a small clinic, treating miners for everything from black lung to broken bones. She was respected for her skill, and her quiet, reserved nature meant no one asked questions about her past. 5 years passed. The memory of Redemption Gulch and the life she once had faded into a dull, persistent ache. The terror of the chase subsided, replaced by a profound loneliness. She built a new life, a fragile fortress of solitude. But at night, in the quiet of her small cabin, she would sometimes take out the wooden box. She would run her fingers over the smooth surface of the eagle feather and remember the man with the courageous eyes, the man whose life had become intertwined with hers, a man she believed she would never see again. She heard snippets of news from travelers passing through. A war between the settlers and the Blackfoot had been narrowly averted. A new treaty was being negotiated, a landmark agreement that would define the borders of the Blackfoot Nation for generations. The leader of the native delegation, they said, was the new chief, a young wise man who had been educated in the East. They called him Chief Kale. Mina now. Lena felt a pang in her chest whenever she heard his name. He had succeeded his father. He was a leader. He had survived and was now fighting for his people. A small, sad smile touched her lips. He was a world away, a lifetime away. He was safe from her, and she was safe from him. That she told herself was all that mattered. Her life in Stone Creek was quiet, predictable, and empty of the passions and betrayals that had nearly destroyed her, and that was how she intended to keep it. Life in Stone Creek continued its steady, monotonous rhythm until the spring of 1883. The town, usually concerned only with the price of silver and the quality of its whiskey, was suddenly electrified with a new kind of excitement. Federal agents and army officers began arriving, followed by surveyors and journalists from the East. Stone Creek had been chosen as the neutral ground for the final signing of the landmark treaty with the Blackfoot Nation. Lena, as everyone knew her, felt a cold dread creep over her. She tried to ignore the buzz to focus on her patience, on the familiar routine of grinding herbs and setting splints. But the town was small, and the news was unavoidable. The Blackfoot delegation was scheduled to arrive within the week, led by Chief Kyle himself. Her carefully constructed walls began to crumble. The ghost of Mina Vance, buried for 5 long years, began to stir. She considered leaving, packing her bag, and running again. But where would she go? She had built a life here, meager as it was. To flee now would be to admit defeat, to spend the rest of her days looking over her shoulder. Besides, she reasoned with a desperate sort of logic he would never recognize her. 5 years of harsh living had etched new lines on her face. Her hair, now streaked with a few strands of grey from stress, was kept in a severe bun. Her hands were rough, her posture stooped, with a weariness that went bone deep. She was Lena, the town healer. Mina was gone. The day the delegation arrived, the entire town turned out. Lena watched from the window of her clinic, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. They rode in, not as warriors, but as statesmen. At their head was Kyle. The sight of him stole her breath. He was no longer the wounded young man she had nursed in a crumbling shack. He was a chief. He sat tall and proud on his horse, his presence commanding his face, more mature, etched with the responsibilities of a leader. He wore a mixture of traditional buckskin and a formal waistcoat, a man straddling 2 worlds with a confidence he hadn't possessed 5 years ago. He was magnificent, and he was a danger she could not afford. For the next few days, Lena made herself scarce. She took her meals in her cabin, sent a boy to fetch her supplies, and saw patients only after dark. She heard the townsfolk talking about the chief, about his eloquence, his fierce intelligence, and his unwavering dedication to his people. He was proving a formidable negotiator, frustrating the government agents who had hoped for a quick and easy signing. One afternoon, she was returning from a walk in the woods behind her cabin, her basket filled with ginseng root, when she saw him. He was alone, standing by the creek that gave the town its name, seemingly lost in thought. He was less than 50 feet away. Lena's blood ran cold. She ducked behind a thicket of pines, her breath catching in her throat. She could have retreated, slipped back into the trees unnoticed, but she was frozen, captivated. She watched as he knelt and cupped some water in his hands, his movements fluid and graceful. The years fell away, and for a heart-stopping moment, he was just Kale again, the man whose life she had held in her hands. The ache of loneliness she had suppressed for so long returned with a crushing force. As if sensing her presence, He suddenly looked up, his gaze sweeping the trees. His eyes, those same dark, intense eyes she remembered so vividly, seemed to pierce the shadows where she hid. They passed over her, then snapped back, narrowing in a flicker of confusion. He saw a woman in a plain dress, her face half hidden by the foliage. A stranger. Lena held her breath, praying he would dismiss her as just another curious townsperson. For a long moment he stared, a strange, questioning look on his face. It was as if he was trying to place a half-forgotten melody. Then one of his warriors called his name from the direction of the town, and he turned away, breaking the spell. Lena sagged against the tree, her legs trembling. It was too close. Far too close. She had been a fool to think she could remain invisible. As she watched him walk back towards the town, a chilling realization washed over her. This treaty, this event that was supposed to bring peace, had brought the past right to her doorstep, and she had a terrible feeling that more than just memories had followed him to Stone Creek. The near encounter by the creek left Lena deeply shaken. She doubled her efforts to remain unseen, but a sense of impending doom shadowed her every move. 2 days later, her fears were realized in the most horrifying way possible. A new delegation arrived in Stone Creek, a group of private investors and land developers from the east there, to observe the treaty proceedings. They were rich, powerful men, their tailored suits and polished boots, a stark contrast to the rugged town. Lena was at the mercantile purchasing laudanum when they walked in. Her back was to the door, but she heard a voice that turned her blood to ice. "The amenities in this town are positively barbaric," the voice drawled, full of the same arrogant charm she remembered. "Still a small price to pay for securing our interests." Lena slowly turned her heart, hammering against her ribs. There, standing by the counter, was Silas Croft. He looked older, wealthier, but his eyes were the same, the cold, predatory eyes of a shark. And standing beside him, looking deferential and anxious, was her father, Jedediah Vance. She felt the floor drop out from under her. For 5 years she had believed she had escaped them. But they were here. The men who had destroyed her life were standing less than 10 feet away. She pulled her bonnet lower, obscuring her face, paid for her things with a trembling hand, and fled the store, her breath coming in ragged gasps. They hadn't come for her. Their presence was tied to the treaty. They were the men Kyle had been fighting all along, the ones who saw the Blackfoot lands not as a home, but as a commodity. The coincidence of their arrival in her sanctuary was a cruel twist of fate. That evening, a knock came at the door of her clinic. Her first instinct was to ignore it, but it was persistent. Peeking through the window, she saw him. Kyle. He was alone, his expression determined. There was no escape. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. "Can I help you, Chief?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral, hoping the dim light of the cabin would hide her features. He stepped into the small room, his presence seeming to shrink the space. His eyes scanned her face, and the flicker of confusion she had seen by the creek returned stronger this time. "I am looking for someone," he said, his voice low. "A woman I knew many years ago. Her name was Mina Vance." "I don't know anyone by that name," Lena said, her voice tight. "You must be mistaken." "Am I?" He took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. She had eyes the color of a stormy sky. She had the hands of a healer, and she had a courage that I have never seen since. He reached out not to touch her, but to point towards the small wooden box sitting on her mantelpiece. And she carried a box just like that one. Lena's composure shattered. She had been so careless leaving it in plain sight. "It is only a box for my herbs," she stammered. "Is it?" Kyle's voice was gentle but firm. Or does it hold a memory? A promise, an eagle feather, perhaps. The truth was laid bare between them. The denials died on her lips. Tears welled in her eyes as the years of fear, loneliness, and pretense washed away, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. Kyle. She whispered the name, feeling foreign on her tongue after so long. A wave of emotion crossed his face, disbelief, recognition, and a profound relief that seemed to shake him to his core. Mina, he breathed. I knew it. I felt it. I never stopped looking for you. He stepped forward and gathered her into his arms. Lena collapsed against him, the strength she had relied on for 5 years, deserting her completely. She was Mina again, and she was in the arms of the one man who had ever truly seen her. But their reunion was cut short by the sound of raised voices from the street. They broke apart and looked out the window. A commotion was brewing in front of the saloon. Silas Croft and Jedediah Vance were there, surrounded by a group of miners they had clearly plied with alcohol. This treaty is a sham. Croft was shouting, his voice ringing through the night. This so-called chief is a fraud. He's plotting to drive us all out. We have proof that he and his warriors are planning an attack. It was a blatant, venomous lie designed to turn the town against the Blackfoot and derail the negotiations. Jedediah stood by his face, pale, nodding, in agreement with Croft's poisonous words. He caught sight of Cale standing in the doorway of Lena's clinic, and then his eyes fell on her, standing in the light behind him. Jedediah Vance's face went white with shock, then contorted into a mask of pure hatred. He had found his runaway daughter, and he had found her with the very man who stood in the way of his fortune. In that moment, Mina knew this was no longer just about a treaty. It had become a personal, deadly confrontation, years in the making. Her past had not only caught up with her, it was about to burn her new life to the ground. The discovery ignited a firestorm. Jedediah Vance, seeing Mina with Kyle, saw not a daughter, but the ultimate betrayal, the living embodiment of his potential ruin. He pointed a trembling finger towards the clinic. "There!" he shrieked, his voice cracking with fury. "That woman is my daughter. She's a traitor colluding with him. She's been his spy in this town all along." The crowd of drunken miners, their minds already poisoned by Croft's rhetoric and cheap whiskey, turned as one their suspicion, morphing into a dangerous mob mentality. They began to advance on the clinic, their faces illuminated by torchlight, their expressions menacing. Kyle pushed Mina back into the cabin. "Stay inside. Bar the door," he commanded, his voice calm but hard as steel. He turned to face the mob alone, his stance immovable, a chief protecting his territory. "This is a lie spun by men who profit from conflict." Kyle's voice boomed, silencing the initial shouts. "Silas Croft and Jedediah Vance want the land my people have lived on for centuries. They will say anything to get it." "He's the liar," Croft retorted, stepping forward. "We have a witness, a man who saw his warriors caching rifles in the hills this very morning." He shoved a nervous-looking man forward, a prospector Mina recognized as a notorious drunk named Miller. Miller, paid and intimidated, stammered out his fabricated story. The crowd roared its approval. It was happening too fast. The carefully planned sabotage was working perfectly. Inside the clinic, Mina's mind raced. Fear warred with a righteous anger that had been dormant for 5 long years. She had run once. She would not run again. Her father and Croft had taken her life from her, forced her into hiding, and now they were trying to destroy the one man who had ever shown her true honor. She looked at the small wooden box on the mantel. The eagle feather, It was a symbol of honor, a sign that she was a friend. But it was also just a feather. It wouldn't stop a mob. But what else was in that box, her mother's things? A small leather-bound journal filled with her mother's notes on herbs and remedies. As she grabbed the box, an old folded piece of paper tucked inside the journal fell out. She had forgotten it was there. It was a legal document, a deed. Years ago, her mother, who had inherited a small plot of land from her own family, had insisted it be put in Mina's name on her 18th birthday. It was a worthless piece of scrubland on the far eastern edge of the Vans Ranch, bordering Blackfoot territory. Her father had always dismissed it as insignificant. But as she looked at the map on the deed, her blood ran cold. The creek where she had found Cale, the hidden ravine with the line shack, it wasn't on her father's land. It was on her land. This small, forgotten plot was the very piece of ground Croft and her father needed to secure their passage to the richer lands beyond. Her father had been trespassing on her property to set his ambush. More than that, his entire expansion plan, the one he was willing to kill for, was legally blocked by this deed he had dismissed as worthless. Clutching the paper, she unbarred the door and stepped out into the torchlight, striding directly towards the mob which parted before her in surprise. She ignored them, her eyes locked on her father. "You call me a traitor, father." She called out, her voice clear and strong, ringing with 5 years of suppressed pain and anger. "You speak of loyalty. Let's talk about the truth." She strode past Kyle, planting herself directly in front of Jedediah and Silas Croft. This man, Silas Croft, hired mercenaries to kidnap Kyle 5 years ago, and my father approved it. They left him for dead on land they believed was theirs. "Lies," Jedediah snarled. "Is it?" Mina held up the deed. "This is the deed to the land where the attack took place. It was gifted to me by my mother. You were not securing your legacy, father. You were committing a crime on my property." She turned to the crowd, her voice rising with passion. "These men don't care about you or this town. They created this panic about an attack to hide their own greed. They want to start a war so they can sweep in and claim the land in the chaos. The only threat to Stone Creek tonight is standing right here." She pointed directly at Croft. A murmur went through the crowd. Her words, spoken with such conviction and backed by a legal document, began to sow seeds of doubt. The federal marshal, who had been trying to control the situation, pushed his way through. "Let me see that paper, ma'am," he said. As he examined the deed, Silas Croft knew the game was up. His plan was unraveling. With a snarl, he drew a concealed pistol from his coat. The word of a treacherous woman and a savage mean nothing. He aimed not at Mina, but at Kyle. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Jedediah Vance, seeing Croft's intent, saw the finality of his ruin. If the chief was murdered, the army would descend, investigations would follow, and everything would be exposed. In a surprising, desperate act of self-preservation that looked almost like paternal instinct, he lunged not at Croft but at Mina. "No!" he screamed, knocking her to the ground. His action saved her from being in the line of fire, but gave Croft a clear shot. The gun roared. Kyle, already moving, dodged to the side, the bullet grazing his arm. Before Croft could fire again, Kyle closed the distance, disarming him with a swift, brutal movement that broke Croft's wrist. The pistol clattered to the dusty street. The marshal and his deputies swarmed in seizing Croft. The crowd, sobered by the gunshot and the undeniable truth of the moment, turned on Miller, the false witness, who immediately confessed to being paid. In the sudden ringing silence, Mina lay on the ground, looking up at her father, who stood over her, his face a wreck of defeat and despair. He hadn't saved her out of love, she realized. He had saved himself from the final, irrevocable consequence of murder. He looked down at her, his daughter the architect of his downfall, and there was nothing left in his eyes, no anger, no love, only a vast, empty ruin. The reckoning had come, not with a blaze of glory or a hail of bullets, but in the quiet, devastating exposure of a lie brought to light by a woman who had simply refused to be a victim any longer. The journey from Stone Creek to Cale's village was a journey between lifetimes. Leaving the world of dusty streets and wooden storefronts behind, Mina rode beside Kyle into the heart of the vast, open plains. The land was a living thing, breathing with the wind and painted in the colors of the setting sun. For the first time in 5 years, she felt not like a fugitive, but like someone returning home to a place she had never been. Yet a quiet apprehension settled in her heart. She was accepted by the chief, but she was still an outsider to his people. Their arrival was met not with celebration, but with a profound, watchful silence. The entire village of the Blackfoot emerged from their lodges, their faces a mixture of curiosity and deep-seated suspicion. They saw their victorious chief, but they also saw the white woman at his side. Mina felt the weight of 1,000 questions in their gazes. She was the face of the people who had tried to cheat them, who had brought them pain and conflict for generations. The most formidable presence was an old woman named Grey Willow, the tribe's revered medicine woman. Her eyes, dark and sharp as obsidian chips, held no welcome. She saw Mina not as a hero, but as a potential poison, a threat to their traditions and way of life. Weeks turned into a month, and Mina's place remained uncertain. While Kyle's love was her anchor, she existed in a lonely space between acceptance and rejection. She learned their language, helped the women with their daily tasks, and offered her knowledge of healing only when asked careful not to overstep the authority of Grey Willow. The turning point came with the first cold snap of autumn. A sickness swift and brutal swept through the children of the village. It was a fever that did not respond to Grey Willow's traditional remedies. The medicine woman worked tirelessly, but the children grew weaker. One small boy, son of a respected warrior, was near death. Kyle came to Mina, his face etched with worry. Grey Willow's heart is good, but her medicine is failing. This is not a spirit sickness of our land. It is a fever I have seen in the white schools. With Cale's blessing, Mina approached Grey Willow not as a challenger, but as an aid. In my mother's learning, there is a tea made from willow bark that can fight such a fever, she said softly, showing the utmost respect. It may not be enough, but it may help your own work. Seeing the desperation in the boy's mother's eyes, Grey Willow gave a curt, reluctant nod. Together, the two healers worked through the night. Grey Willow chanted and applied cool poultices, while Mina brewed the bitter tea and gently coaxed the boy to drink. They did not speak, but a silent understanding passed between them, a shared, fierce determination to save a life. By dawn, the boy's fever had broken. He was weak, but he would live. A collective sigh of relief went through the village. Grey Willow looked at Mina, and for the first time, the suspicion in her eyes was replaced by a flicker of profound respect. She had not been replaced. Her wisdom had been aided. In saving the child, Mina had proven that her presence was not a threat, but a new strength. She had begun to build the bridge Kyle had spoken of, not with promises or treaties, but with a single, compassionate act. She was no longer just the chief's wife. She was a healer for the people. In the aftermath, justice was swift. Silas Croft and his conspirators were taken into federal custody, their scheme to incite war exposed for all to see. Jedediah Vance, ruined and disgraced, was implicated in the conspiracy, his testimony sealing Croft's fate. He lost his ranch, his standing, and the last shred of his humanity, a broken man haunted by the ghost of the daughter he had cast aside. With the threat removed, the treaty was signed. It was a historic moment, not of conquest, but of mutual respect securing the future of the Blackfoot Nation. Kyle, his arm in a sling, but his spirit undaunted, stood as a symbol of a new kind of leadership, one forged in wisdom, not just warfare. Mina stood by his side, no longer hiding as Lena, but embracing the name and the past that had shaped her. She was not just the woman who had saved the chief's son. She was the woman who had saved the treaty, the woman whose courage had brought truth into the light. When the delegations departed and the dust settled over Stone Creek, Mina and Kyle found themselves standing at a precipice between their two worlds. "What will you do now?" Kyle asked her softly, his hand finding hers. "I spent 5 years running from who I was," she said, looking into his eyes. "I don't want to run anymore. But I don't belong in the world I came from, and I am a stranger to yours." Kyle brought her hand to his lips. "You are not a stranger. You are the woman my heart could never forget. My world is wherever you are. Come with me, Mina. Not as a stranger, but as my partner, my counsel, my wife. Help me build a bridge between our people, a future that men like Croft and your father could never imagine." Looking at him, she saw not an ending, but a new beginning. A life not of hiding, but of building. A love not born of a fleeting secret moment, but one that had endured betrayal, distance, and time itself. In the heart of the wild, unforgiving West, she had found her true home. Thank you for listening to this story of courage, betrayal, and unforgettable love. If you were captivated by Mina and Kale's journey, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this story with someone who loves a dramatic tale of the Old West. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on our next real-life drama. Your support allows us to keep bringing these incredible stories to you. What part of their story moved you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time.